The year is 1917. Russia, a vast empire teetering on the brink, is embroiled in the First World War, a conflict that has exposed the deep fissures within its society. While the Romanov dynasty projected an image of strength and stability, the reality was far different. Decades of social inequality, economic hardship, and political repression had simmered beneath the surface, fueled by the deprivations of war. This is not the story of well-known figures like Lenin or Trotsky, whose names echo through history books. This is about the undercurrents, the whispers in breadlines, the clandestine meetings in dimly lit rooms, the untold stories of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. Born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov in 1870, Lenin's path towards revolution began with a deeply personal tragedy. The execution of his older brother, Alexander, in 1887 for plotting to assassinate Tsar Alexander III, ignited a fire within him, a fervent desire for change that would shape the course of Russian history. He immersed himself in legal studies, but his true calling lay not in the courtroom, but in the burgeoning revolutionary circles of Petrograd. It was here that his Marxist ideology began to solidify, fueled by a belief in the power of the working class to overthrow the oppressive Tsarist regime. In 1895, Lenin took a decisive step, uniting various Marxist factions into the Union for the Struggle for Liberation of the Working Class. Their efforts to rally workers to the Marxist cause, however, were met with swift repression. Lenin and his comrades were arrested, and he endured a year in prison, followed by 3 years of exile in Siberia. This period of enforced isolation, far from extinguishing his revolutionary zeal, only served to strengthen his resolve and refine his political theories. Exile in Siberia proved to be a crucible for Lenin's intellectual development. Upon his release in 1900, he journeyed to Western Europe, where he continued his revolutionary activities under the now famous pseudonym Lenin. His seminal pamphlet, What Is to Be Done, published in 1902, laid out his vision for a highly disciplined party of professional revolutionaries, a vanguard that he believed essential to guide the Russian proletariat towards socialism. The formation of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, RSDWP, in 1903 marked a significant milestone. But even within this nascent party, divisions emerged. Lenin's Bolsheviks, advocating for a more militant approach, clashed with the Mensheviks, who favored a more gradual, democratic path to socialism. This fundamental rift would eventually lead to a formal split in 1912, with Lenin consolidating his control over the Bolshevik faction. The 1905 revolution, triggered by widespread strikes across the Russian Empire, offered Lenin a glimpse of the potential for popular uprising. Nicholas II's concessions, including the promise of a constitution and an elected legislature, proved fleeting. Order restored, the Tsar reneged on his promises, forcing Lenin back into exile in 1907. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 further solidified Lenin's anti-war stance. He viewed the conflict as an imperialist struggle, urging soldiers to turn their guns on the capitalist leaders who had sent them to the trenches. The devastating impact of the war on Russia, with its staggering casualties and economic disruption, created a climate ripe for revolution. The February Revolution of 1917, marked by food riots and strikes in Petrograd, forced the abdication of Nicholas II. In this power vacuum, a dual authority emerged, the provisional government sharing uneasy control with the Soviets, councils of soldiers, and workers. Lenin, allowed passage through Germany by authorities who hoped his return would further destabilize Russia, seized this moment. His call for the overthrow of the provisional government, though initially met with accusations of being a German agent, gained traction amidst the growing popular discontent. The Bolsheviks' promise of peace, land, and bread resonated deeply with a war-weary population. In October 1917, Lenin, having secretly returned to Petrograd, orchestrated the Bolshevik seizure of power. This marked the dawn of the world's first Marxist state, a pivotal moment not only for Russia but for the trajectory of the 20th century. Lenin's seizure of power was not the culmination of the revolution, but rather the beginning of a new and even more tumultuous chapter. The Bolshevik decree on land, redistributing land ownership to the peasantry, addressed a deeply rooted grievance and garnered widespread support. However, the promise of peace proved more elusive. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, signed with Germany in March 1918, extricated Russia from the devastating First World War, but at a heavy cost. Vast territories were ceded, a bitter pill for many to swallow and a source of future conflict. The fledgling Bolshevik government faced immediate and formidable challenges. Opposition from within and without erupted into a brutal civil war, a complex and often chaotic conflict that pitted the Red Army, loyal to the Bolsheviks, against a disc coalition of white forces, including monarchists, liberals, and other socialist groups. Foreign powers, fearing the spread of communism, intervened, further complicating the already tangled web of alliances and rivalries. The Civil War was a period of immense suffering, marked by widespread famine, disease, and unspeakable atrocities committed by both sides. Despite the odds stacked against them, the Bolsheviks, driven by their ideological fervor and Lenin's unwavering leadership, emerged victorious in 1920. The victory, however, came at a tremendous cost, leaving the country in ruins and its social fabric deeply scarred. The creation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, in 1922 marked the formal establishment of the world's first communist state. It was a bold experiment, an attempt to build a society based on the principles of Marxism-Leninism, an ideology that promised equality and prosperity but ultimately delivered neither. Lenin's health, already fragile, deteriorated rapidly in the years following the Civil War. A series of strokes incapacitated him, and he died in January 1924, leaving a void in the leadership. His embalmed body, placed in a mausoleum near the Moscow Kremlin, became a symbol of the revolution and the cult of personality that surrounded him. Petrograd, the cradle of the revolution, was renamed Leningrad in his honor, a testament to his enduring influence. The struggle for succession that followed Lenin's death was a fierce and often ruthless power struggle. Joseph Stalin, a shrewd and ruthless political operator, ultimately emerged as the victor, consolidating his power and ushering in an era of totalitarian rule that would define the Soviet Union for decades to come. The legacy of the Bolshevik Revolution and of Lenin himself remains complex and contested to this day. It was a revolution that promised liberation but ultimately delivered oppression, a stark reminder of the gap that can exist between revolutionary ideals and the realities of power. Beyond the well-known figures and events, the Bolshevik Revolution unfolded in countless individual lives, often in quiet, unseen ways. The factory workers, weary of long hours and meager wages, found new hope in the promise of worker control over the means of production. The peasants, long tied to the land and burdened by feudal obligations, saw the redistribution of land as a path to a better future. Women, traditionally relegated to the domestic sphere, stepped into new roles, participating in the revolution and demanding equal rights. But the revolution also brought its share of disillusionment and hardship. The initial euphoria gave way to the harsh realities of civil war, economic collapse, and political repression. The Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, ruthlessly suppressed dissent, targeting not only counter-revolutionaries but also those perceived as threats to the new regime, including intellectuals, artists, and even fellow socialists who questioned the Bolsheviks' methods. The dream of a worker's paradise quickly turned into a totalitarian state, where individual freedoms were sacrificed in the name of the collective. The impact of the Bolshevik Revolution reverberated far beyond Russia's borders. The rise of the first communist state sent shockwaves through the world, inspiring revolutionary movements in other countries and fueling the rise of anti-communist sentiment in the West. The Cold War, A decades-long ideological and geopolitical struggle between the Soviet Union and the United States had its roots in the events of 1917. The world was irrevocably changed, divided into two opposing camps, each vying for global dominance. The story of the Bolshevik Revolution is not a simple narrative of heroes and villains. It is a complex tapestry woven with threads of hope and despair, idealism and brutality, triumph and tragedy. It is a story that reminds us of the transformative power of revolutionary movements, but also of the dangers of unchecked power and the human cost of ideological fanaticism. It is a story that continues to resonate today, offering valuable lessons about the enduring human quest for social justice and the challenges of building a more equitable world. It is a story that demands to be remembered, not just for its historical significance, but for the profound questions it raises about the nature of revolution, the limits of ideology, and the enduring human capacity for both great good and unspeakable evil.